So hey guys, today we're going to be talking about damage step rulings and just in general damage step stuff. So there's a lot to unpackage, but we'll start off with the very basics. So all monsters, for the most part, with the exception of link monsters, will have attack and defense values. And this means that you can be in attack position or defense position. So if we have, let's say, uh, we'll go with, I guess, something really weak. Let's see. Let's go with some U-Bells. So let's do D-Lotus. So let's say I control a copy of D-Lotus and my opponent controls a copy of D-Lotus here, alright? So if I have D-Lotus in attack, I'll be using the 0 attack value or the 0 defense value if I am in the defense position. So whatever position you are in, that is going to be the stat you're using for battle. And only attack position monsters can initiate attacks. Unless you have specifically, I suppose, a monster that can attack in defense position, which those do exist. And they use their defense for both calculations instead. And when you are attacking another attack monster, the values that you're comparing are going to be the attack position. So it's just essentially one stat being used at any given time. So it's not like if you're being attacked, you use the defense value all of a sudden. So that's how that works. And that is the very basics, right? But then immediately following that, if we have some monsters with some more attacks, so it's not going to be very noticeable if we start off with explaining D-Lotus. So let's say we have Orion the Battle King here, right? So let's say my opponent controls an Orion the Battle King in defense position. So if I attack Orion here with itself, I suppose, but my guy, of course, is in attack, my opponent's is in defense, their Orion will be destroyed by battle, which is different from being destroyed by card effect, but it does count as being technically affected by your opponent's card. It counts as being like removed by your opponent's card, which is like a different thing. But yeah, that's a little bit confusing, but that's how it works, I guess. And if you were to attack into something with equal value, right, or greater value, what happens specifically if your opponent is in defense position is your attacking monster is not destroyed if the defense value is greater than your attack value. So let's say we have Ice Water attacking into our defense position Orion the Battle King, then neither will be destroyed by that battle. And if we were to attack something with greater defense, so in this case, let's say we have, I guess, Ice Water attacking into Orion, both of them will be remaining on the field, and you will just take the difference as battle damage, and that'll lower your life points. However, if the defense is lower, right? So let's say instead now we have Orion attacking into itself. Orion will be destroyed by that battle, but you don't take any battle damage. So that is just how it works, I guess. So what happens if we attack something with the same value, though? So let's say we have... Let's see if we have any vanillas that have matching stat lines here. Nope. So let's go with, I guess, Kribo then, because I'm pretty sure Kribo has the same stats. Right? No? 300, 200? Wow, really? Then, I'm pretty sure they're Magispectors with the same stat line. Nope. Not this one. Not that one. Sure, Magispector, Unicorn, Kirin. So let's say I have a Kirin in defense and a Kirin in attack position. The Kirin in attack attacks the defense position Kirin. Then what happens is absolutely nothing. So a battle is conducted, and sometimes that matters. Sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, essentially neither will be destroyed by that battle either, and no battle damage will be taken. However, if both Kirins were in attack position, so they have the same attack stat, of course, they just both get destroyed by that battle. So that might get you wondering, okay, so what if we have D Lotus here doing battle? So we have 2 copies of D Lotus. My opponent controls one, I control one, and they both do battle. What happens in this case? So what happens is absolutely nothing. So, as opposed to what happens with Kirin, both will be destroyed by battle. If we have 0 attack monsters, neither will be destroyed by battle. So, this allows you to do a little bit of a degenerate play. So, if we have Ibli, which is now no longer legal, if we have Ibli, and we link this off with specifically Almirage, this has 0 attack. So that means if you were to go battle with Nightmare Raptor Ibli, it will not destroy the Almirage. So this was like a tech I played in one of my Kashtira decks at some point, because, it was just so efficient and it played around Nib. So that was nice. And it was also good in the mirror, shutting down fellow cash players very hard. So yeah, that was fairly strong, I'd say. And yeah, essentially, normal summon Ibli, link off Ibli for Almirage, it gets summoned to your opponent's field. They'll probably try to crash it. It won't work. Well, I mean, sometimes they do. You see that a few times. But yeah. That's kind of just, well, still, I'd argue, the basics. And then we have a few more things to go into before we even begin to touch the damage step. So there are effects with well, that can be activated during the battle phase, so we're going to cover some battle specific ones. So we have, of course, the effect to negate an attack, right? So let's see if I can find it. Sure. So I can't find the actual trap card like this, negate attack, but all right. So let's say we have Waboku, and then we have Threatening Roar. So Threatening Roar, this states your opponent cannot declare an attack this turn, and then I guess we should grab Magic Cylinder then, because that's easier to search. So with Waboku, it says you take no battle damage this turn, your monsters cannot be destroyed by battle this turn. So battle damage would include piercing battle damage, direct attacks, and attacking over monsters, essentially, right? When you're comparing attack values. So that's Waboku, essentially, right? That's what this would protect you from, because that's what battle damage encompasses. It's essentially just the damage that gets inflicted from specifically battles, kind of, and it's its own thing. So there is essentially effect damage and battle damage in the game, so you would still be able to inflict specifically effect damage, and I guess there's also kind of pain costs, which isn't an effect, so it's like a third different category. So that's kind of weird to think about, but yeah, that's Waboku, I guess. And then we have, I guess we'll use Magic Cylinder for this because it's more simple than King Synchro. So when an opponent's monster declares an attack, target the attacking monster, negate the attack, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its attack. So this could be very simple or kind of complicated. So let's say we have Link Karibo, and we have, let's go with, I don't know, let's go with something different. Gemini Elf. So let's assume you're attacking with Gemini Elf, and then you're attacking to, let's say, I don't know, D Lotus. Your opponent here, they could technically do Magic Cylinder here, but for some reason they decide, Right now on attack declaration, I want to summon Link Rebo, and then I'll Magic Cylinder when you redeclare onto Link Rebo. But does this actually work? That is the question. So on attack declaration is when Link Rebo can use its effect here. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you contribute this card, change that opponent's monster's attack to 0 until the end of this turn. So if we were to use Gemini Elf to attack the Lotus, that was our attack declaration right there. So if you summon Link Rebo right now, well, you should have summoned it before, but right now, Link Rebo will hit the field and the attack is already declared. So now you're doing essentially a redeclaration, kind of, which is different from an attack declaration like it's stating here, meaning you cannot use this effect of Link Rebo. So now, can we use Magic Cylinder? When an opponent's monster declares an attack, same issue. So at this point now, you already lost the window to activate Magic Cylinder. So this is what we would call a horrible play. So you could have just simply activated Magic Cylinder and then tributed to special summon Link Rebo later, or you could have special summoned Link Rebo earlier. And either option would be fine. But essentially, when a card says, when you do something on attack declaration, you have to actually do that thing on attack declaration or you miss the window and you can't do it anymore. So yeah, that's how that works. And then if we have Threatening Roar, your opponent cannot declare an attack this turn. Or we have, for example, Phantom Knight's Fogblade. How this works is, let's see. So this says, activate this card by targeting one effect monster on the field, negate that face-up monster's effects. That face-up monster cannot attack. So what both of these cards are saying is essentially that card or your opponent's monster or monsters in whichever case cannot declare an attack or whatever. But if you chain either of these effects to a declaration that is already happening, your opponent's monster is pretty much already attacking, so they won't be stopped by cards like this. So this is more important, I guess, probably for Master Duel. So for Master Duel in particular, right, you're going to have to be aware of your chain settings. So if you do it wrong, you can actually not negate any attacks or prevent being attacked if you chain Threatening Roar or Fem Knight's Fogblade at the wrong time, essentially, right? So it's the same kind of thing with Magic Cylinder and the redeclarations here. So next thing. So if we had a Gemini Elf plus Samsara D Lotus and we special summon Link Rebo, why exactly can you redeclare here? So if we were to do, for example, let's say a monster that does some attack modification, like let's say Vanquish Soul Pluton. So we have, let's say, Pluton attacking into Gemini Elf. If I use the effect of Infinite Impermanence, why is it that my Pluton cannot redeclare or cancel its attack after Infinite Impermanence is applied onto my Pluton? And of course, I wouldn't want to attack with Pluton because if it gets negated, its attack points will hit 0. So it'll end up being destroyed in a battle with Gemini Elf, also in attack position. So in this case, the reason why you will have to follow through with the Pluton attack after declaring it is because although an effect was also activated, similar to like Link Rebo, for example, the difference between Infinite Impermanence and a Link Rebo, like if Link Rebo attributes itself off the field as well, you would be able to cancel your attack. So the reasoning behind this, like even if you're not attacking into Link Rebo, like let's say we control Link Rebo and Gemini Elf and I attack into Gemini Elf and then Link Rebo gets tributed. Why is it that I can cancel my attack and not be forced to declare an attack into Gemini Elf? Well, the correct answer to this is that the amount of bodies, I guess, or the monsters on field, like they change. So if we were to add or take away essentially a monster from either side of the field, whether it be like by destruction or tributing, just as long as the amount of bodies changes. So if something would be like normal or special summoned, if a monster is removed via card effect, when it is specifically during attack declaration, then it kind of messes with your initial attack and you're able to cancel. But if we use infinite impermanence, or in this case, it could be like a Phantom Knight's Fogblade, which is kind of complicated to think about. But yeah, if we were to use either of those effects, the amount of monsters doesn't change on either field. So your attack would still have to follow through. And a more modern example of this would be something like, I guess, a Fenrir. So let's say we have a bunch of high attack monsters on our opponent's field, and we attack into them with Fenrir. We can then use Fenrir's effect to banish, and if the banish succeeds, Fenrir would then not be required to follow through with its attack. So in this case, let's say maybe we're staring down specifically a negated, let's say, Shishao and Baron. Maybe they were negated with, I don't know, let's say Dark Ruler no more, and you're trying to at least clear the Changing so Blackout is not activatable. And that'll be for later because Blackout is not activatable while you have a single card on your field. So you're going to try to special summon Fenrir, attack into Qishao, banish Qishao, and then it doesn't matter, you could attack into Baron as well. And then as long as the guy you're targeting with Fenrir gets banished, you don't have to follow through with an attack on Fenrir, and then you can just exit the battle phase and then continue with your plays in main phase 2. But if your opponent were to like chain imperm onto Fenrir's effect, then Fenrir would have to follow through with the attack into either one of these two, and then it would be destroyed by a battle because it has less attack points. So yeah, the attack points, all these little kinds of rulings, they do somewhat matter. They do come up and they can be game losing, like if your Fenrir just gets destroyed. In this case, you're kind of just suffering. So yeah, this is still what I would regard as kind of basic, I guess, battle phase and battle related rulings and stuff. And yet, we haven't even talked about the damage step. So the damage step. Now that it's not that fun of a time, but all right. Let's break down some of the important things. So let's assume we have something that triggers in specifically the damage step. So let's say we have Sangan. Sangan, if this gets destroyed by a battle, it will get sent to the graveyard effectively, triggering this effect. And this will happen after damage, but still like technically in around the damage. So if we have an effect like Therian King Regulus, which negates effects, this does not work in damage. Pretty simple, pretty simply explained, right? So against like a Kishira Fenrir, this does not happen in battle. This effect happens on attack declaration. This is about the limit as to where Therian King Regulus can negate. So if we were to activate Fenrir effect, we can Regulus negate it. If we were to destroy Sangan by battle, Therian King Regulus cannot negate. But if we have, let's say, a Baron de Flor, Baron negates specifically the activation, which allows it to negate, right? But if we were to then look at a different type of negate, if we go ahead and look at Utopia, specifically this one. Uh, so it would be C39, I guess. Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray. So this card has the effect of once per turn, while this card is equipped with a ZW monster card quick effect, you can target one effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects. If you do, halve its attack. So this negates effect, right? And not activations. And it also works different because it targets. So if we were to then try to do the same type of thing with this, so let's say we have something that modifies its attack, I guess. So let's say we have, I guess in this case, it'll be a Crusadia Avramax, but specifically, this will not be link summoned, so it is targetable. So if we're doing battle with Crusadia Avramax, with the Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray here, this effect of Magnetic Crusadia Avramax is going to happen during damage calc. So Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray, I believe, can activate before damage calc. And that is the limit to when this can activate. So it would not actually be able to negate, I believe, Crusadia Avramax in chain, I believe. So I could be wrong, or it could activate, but simply because this has some modification to either attack or defense, this can be activated around damage calc. And sometimes there are things that just cannot activate during damage calc. And this is pretty important for several reasons. So for example, let's assume you have the negate of Therian King Regulus, but your opponent has something like an Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray. If they were to go battle first, what we could do is we could do battle over one of our opponent's monsters. So in this case, let's say you control Fenrir and Therian King Regulus. I'm going to attack Kashtira Fenrir, and during damage calc, I will then negate Therian King Regulus. And this allows me to then simultaneously remove Kashtira Fenrir and prevent Therian King Regulus from negating any of my effects, and this will be not respondable by whatever you have or what you're doing. A more relevant example of this, I think, that's a little bit more modern, is if we're playing Blackwing. Blackwing has this handy-dandy kind of hand trap that actually has the effect to modify attack or defense. And that monster is, of course, Chinook, the Snow Blast. So this makes monsters lose 700 attack and also negate its effects. So we can do a similar play if we were to, for example, control, let's say, where is it? Blackwing Dragon, which is presumably somewhere here. I'm just super blind and I can't see it. Or maybe it's not here at all. But yeah, just any synchro actually, and this is activatable. So yeah, it just works. Unless your opponent has something like an Apollosa, in which case it kind of maybe works situationally. Kind of depends really, but yeah. If we have negate effect versus negate activation, it can come up like this, right? And technically there are some game states where you may have been able to win if you were kind of, I guess, abusing the damage step. And not all decks can do this because it's like kind of niche and kind of a niche thing to have, but you know, still pretty powerful nonetheless, right? So that is damage step for you, I suppose. So if we have, for example, I guess a Chundra, when does Chundra actually activate this effect? This is at the start of damage. So yeah, this is pretty stoppable by For example, I guess it would be our copy of Utopia would be able to negate Chundra in chain. So we could go chain 1 Chundra, chain 2 Utopia to negate Chundra. That'd be something we could do. And this window is pretty important. So the thing about if we were to negate Chundra like this is that it's not just specifically with negates, right? Effects in general cannot be activated during damage step unless they modify attack or defense. So with the Tenpai cards, none of the Tenpai cards actually modify your attack or defense, especially not your Synchro Summon cards, right? So during damage, you would not be able to activate Chundra, Fadra, or Pydra's effect to Synchro Summon. So if you were to um, usually to dodge some effects in the battle phase with Tenpai, you would use the effect to Synchro Summon, right? So during damage, Chundra cannot be protected by these effects. So if we had, for example, a Forbidden Droplet, this would force essentially your opponent to complete the attack with Chundra, destroying Chundra presumably, and then Chundra would be off the field and not able to resolve the effect to summon, which is potentially really good depending on if you have the exact thing you need to perform this kind of play. So in the case of Blackwing, you would have Chinook. In the case of Utopia, you have Ultimate Leo Utopia Ray, which can do that type of thing. And I believe if we do a flip effect, I don't even want to think about it, but I think you can probably redeclare if a monster gets flip face down and you were attacking into it. I don't know if you get to redeclare if a monster that you're not attacking gets flip face down, because there like still somewhat just some more intricacies to just battling and just the damage step and all of that stuff in general. But I mean, main takeaways: if a monster has the same attack, they will destroy each other by battle unless the attack is 0, because you can't destroy anything with 0 attack, I suppose. And then if you were to attack, the only time you get to redeclare is if specifically, I guess, something changes with the monsters on either side of the field. So it's usually going to be, I guess, it might be like if something is flip face down, you might get to redeclare. If the body count changes on either side of the field, like if one of your guys gets destroyed or one of your opponent's cards gets destroyed, you should be able to also redeclare or cancel your attack. And of course, you have the option to cancel your attack during redeclaration. So yeah, aside from that, to negate effects in around the damage step, I suppose, you need to specifically be negating activation and not effects. And also, a lot of effects will not be activatable in the damage step. So just for example, we have Doom King Ballard Rock, which specifically also says that except during the damage step. And there are a good amount of cards that will also just state except during the damage step if they don't work during the damage step. But even if they don't say except during the damage step, there's some effects that don't work during the damage step. So this kind of feels like a useless piece of text, I guess, somewhat. So yeah, there's quite a lot of nuance and little things you can potentially kind of utilize to win duels, I guess. The most relevant one, I think, is probably going to have to do with Infinite Impermanence or Forbidden Droplet. But if you're actually Giga Brain, I guess here's a play you could do. So let's assume you have Forbidden Droplet, right? So we're going to say maybe our opponent controls, let's say Sword Soul Grandmaster Chi, and we're going to declare an attack on Chi with, let's say, Razin. So if I were to declare an attack on Razin onto Sword Soul Grandmaster Chi here, you already know something's weird. Why am I declaring an attack with Razin? So here you might decide, okay, I guess I will activate whatever form of removal you might have to out Razin. So in this case, maybe you have Cheng Ying plus Chi. So we'll do Chi effect to negate Razin to then attempt to banish Razin. So okay, funny thing here. Okay, what if I never actually had Forbidden Droplet in the first place and it was all just the bluff? And the card I actually had was, in fact, evenly matched. So then I can drop evenly and you have no interruptions here. But that would just be a pretty complicated play to kind of do. And they're kind of like really insane bluffs you could do. And these are like not like the plays you should just go for. It's more like the kind of play you might be able to win off of if you have nothing else that you can go for, right? So for example, a thing you might be able to do is, let's assume I have triple tactics talents and I have Maxi. I could normal summon Maxi to bluff that I'm playing Sprite, even if I'm maybe not playing Sprite, maybe I'm playing something else entirely. And if my opponent drops a Maxi expecting me to do the inherent summon of a Sprite, then I can activate triple tactic talents to draw to hopefully get myself out of this terrible situation, you know, of having normal summon Maxi and having a bunch of dead cards in hand. And yeah, the game has a lot of complicated things and nuances like this. So you might not have realized it, but you might be misplaying. Like it's not going to be like obvious misplays, but it's like little misplays regarding things like this, where you've done like little misplays like just 10 plus times in a single turn or over the course of a duel. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and hopefully you guys learned a thing or two. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.